Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kathy Hudson, MPP 2004, and the current I'm the current vice chair of the HKS Alumni Board and the incoming chair for next year. I am delighted to introduce our closing keynote speaker for our reunion, Governor Deval Patrick, co-director of the Center for Public Leadership and the David R. Gergen Professor of the Practice of Public Leadership here at HKS. Governor Patrick is originally from the south side of Chicago. He attended Milton Academy, thanks to the organization A Better Chance, and then had attended Harvard College and Harvard Law School. Between college and law school, he lived and worked in East and West Africa, and after law school, Governor Patrick clerked for a federal appellate judge and then launched a career as an attorney and business executive, becoming a staff attorney at the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, an assistant attorney general for civil rights in the Clinton administration, and he also was a partner at 2 Boston law firms and a senior executive at 2 Fortune 50 companies. From 2006 to 2015, he served as governor of Massachusetts. During his 2 terms as governor, he focused on healthcare, expanding care to 98% of the Commonwealth residents. He also focused on improving public schools and the public infrastructure and launched initiatives stimulating clean energy and biotechnology. Under his leadership, Massachusetts ranked first in the nation in student achievement, energy efficiency, healthcare coverage, veteran services, and entrepreneurship, and achieved a 25-year high employment rate under his leadership. After his time in public policy, Governor Patrick founded and led an impact investment fund, the first fund in a major financial institution to focus on delivering both superior financial return and significant positive social impact. He continues to invest in mission-driven businesses as an advisor and board member, including serving on the advisory board of Our Generation Speaks, an organization that brings Israelis and Palestinians together through entrepreneurship. Governor Patrick also remains involved in progressive politics, mainly by supporting local grassroots groups working to build engagement among disenfranchised and marginalized voters. For today's session, Governor Patrick will be interviewed by one of our upcoming Kennedy School graduates and member of the 2024 MC MPA class, Omer Rafiq. So please join me in welcoming Governor Patrick and Omer to the stage.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and a warm welcome back to the alumni cohort of 4s and 9s, a cohort that I very much look forward to joining here next week. Governor Patrick, it's a privilege to be here with you today to discuss the topic of paramount importance, leadership in today's democracy. It is no secret that democracy is under stress, here and abroad. From rising authoritarianism to increasing populist movements, democracies around the globe are facing unprecedented challenges. Most notably, the decline of the United States in the Global Democracy Index is undoubtedly an indicator that cannot be ignored. Often heralded as the bastion of democratic values and governance, we have seen a notable erosion in our democratic institutions and practices. Political polarization, challenges to electoral integrity, and diminishing public trust used to be sporadic instances expected out of the experiment that American democracy ought to be. Today, these elements have gone from sporadic instances to being laced into the very fabric of our democracy, thereby diminishing public trust in government. Governor, we can have a discussion that provides a normative explanation as to how we got here. From a leadership standpoint, I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. But I'd like to focus more on where we go from here. As we would say in my old line of work, staying left of bang is vital, but being prepared for what happens when the bang happens is a vital element of leadership as well. So that said, given that the proverbial bang has happened, where do you see us going from here?
Wow. All of that is one question.
It's one question. The Harvard Kennedy School way.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you very much for the generous introduction, Madam President-elect. And Omer, thank you so much for conducting the the interview, at least thanks so far. For those who are wondering, the guy who's actually dressed as a governor is the student. You look good. You look good.
I've got to match your swagger on stage. I couldn't do it.
So I think we face two kinds of challenges to our democracy today, and they relate. One is how to make it function, right? So how to make it so that we can reliably register, stay registered, vote, have the vote counted. We've got issues in terms of the amount of money in our policy making and in politics. Hyper-partisan gerrymandering. There are lots of ways in which, as a friend of mine describes it, we've been treating our democracy for a long time as if it would tolerate limitless abuse without breaking. And we are breaking it. We've been careless about it. And there are a lot of great ideas out there, and some legislation, which, as you know, has been stuck, that speak to how to make it function. But that is just, to me, one of the two related parts of our challenge. The other is how to make it meaningful. There are 30% or so, but turnout tends to be highest during a presidential election. 30% of the electorate doesn't vote. Eligible electorate doesn't vote, not just because it's inconvenient, but because folks don't think the vote matters. And why wouldn't they feel that way? I mean, if you don't live in a battleground state, you could easily think the presidential election has nothing to do with you at all. If you are Democrat in a so-called red state or a Republican in a so-called blue state, nobody talks to you. I mean, David will remember when I was running the first time here and just learning about the political dynamic. We think of it and we talk about it as Democrat, Republican, but in fact it's insider, outsider. And I think that's what a lot of people are feeling. So the way in which we make our democracy function is critically important. Actually making it possible to have a participatory democracy, but how you make people feel like they can get outcomes from their participation that actually speaks to their needs, that's a much bigger and longer term challenge, a related one, but one I think we also have to confront. And I do respect and I support the folks who are encouraging civic education or education in civics. I believe in that very strongly, but I don't think that's enough. I think you got to practice democracy to make it work.
Mm-hmm. So I think along those lines, one of the themes that you've repeatedly touched on through the two classes that you teach here, which is leadership in crisis and then the moral leadership required to run for public office. Another thing that you've often shared with your students and fellows at the Center for Public Leadership is you've often stated that the loss of confidence in democracy as a path to change derives from our leaders' relentless focus on the next election or news cycle, or the next poll instead of the next generation. As I mentioned, you've shared this analysis with your students over the past year, while encouraging us to focus on our why, but not for the sake of pursuing a position or title, but for the sake of sustaining something greater than ourselves. I think that said, what is your message to those passionate about leadership in today's democracy, but may be reluctant to get engaged because of a few that are at times coined as morally bankrupt and or extremely self-serving?
Gee whiz. Are you going to disclose the fact that you were a course assistant in one of those courses?
I may or may not have.
And a student in the other. I've only held one elective office, but I'm interested in politics, and I'm interested in politics. Barney Frank used to describe government as the name we give to the things we choose to do together. Still the best description of government I've ever heard. Politics is the name we give to how we make those choices. And I think about politics that way. I was struck and have been struck as I think about and observe and participate in politics, how many people want to have this or that job, but not necessarily do it. They want to be in the seat and have the title and all that stuff, but you actually doing the job requires not just accumulating political capital. You got to spend it if you want to do stuff. And I think I have maybe a naive or old-fashioned notion that you in politics, like in the rest of life, you get what you give, and when you spend your political capital in meaningful ways, not wastefully, but in meaningful ways to create progress and make meaningful change, I think it actually does redound to your political benefit, but it's not in terms of the accumulating or the refreshing of political capital. But that's not a customary view. When I ran the first time, I think I appreciated at some level that all of these jobs, and certainly being a candidate, was a balance of substance and performance art. And so I had to I felt like the performance art part was trivializing of the substance, and so I had to up my game in the performance art part to get it in the right balance. Now it's all performance art. And so what I see and what I worry about are two things that may relate to your question. One is that people are coming into it with the performance primary, not just in the way they behave, but in how they think about politics, why they want to be in it. And secondly, a lot of good people with a lot of great ideas and imagination and creativity and humility are staying out at a time when we need them. So you know from the end of the course, I think those are the very, very people we have to encourage to step in, and not necessarily to make a career of it. I respect the folks who do. But the system is supposed to function so that you can come and go when you feel like you have something to contribute, and you step away when you feel you have to. For those of you not from Massachusetts, we don't have term limits for governor. I have a term limit named Diane, and she said two terms, and that's it, and that was fine.
So apart from the Trump, we have a few Massachusetts state legislators. I don't know if they're in attendance, but they could formalize this. Apart from the term limits, I want to go back and peel the layer on the substance and performance art. So another thing that you've often shared when discussing the notion of moral leadership is you've stated that confusing cynicism with sophistication and deeming kindness and generosity as something incompatible with tough-mindedness as a leader is this new phenomenon that's happening within public leadership circles. Now, how would you say that this is, or would you classify this as a setback when it comes to being a moral leader today? And how, if at all, is this hindering rising leaders from being principled in their approach to preserving democracy? And again, with the emphasis on the substance and performance part and how you balance with what you've shared with us.
Can't we just listen to him? So, I think these questions are really important and hard to do, hard to respond to in sort of sound bites. I think there is a phenomenon. I think I've said I observe it in the generation in school today, but it was probably always true, that we are hard at work confusing cynicism for sophistication, meaning we are, and cynicism is, it's a protective blanket. Mm-hmm. It's the stuff, it's what you do when you don't want to take a chance on believing in an outcome that seems a little bit out of reach. I don't think, by the way, cynicism built this country, but it's a veil out there. You get it in all kinds of settings, in the media and in the world of punditry, and you get it in class from time to time as well. And I worry about that because I think it's self-limiting. I think that there are lots of false choices we are confronted in politics today. And we are often confronted with them in breathless ways, but they are false. It's not to say there aren't choices to be made in politics and in public policy, but nobody says you have to, everybody says, I shouldn't say. It is not true, let me put it that way, that you have to, you have to hate a member of the other party to be a member in good standing of your own, right? You don't have to hate business to press for social justice, or to hate the rich to deal with inequality. You don't have to hate police to believe Black Lives Matter. You can go on down the line. You don't have to hate or fear our history as Americans to love this country. You don't have to hate it. And to some extent, I think we have an important opportunity and challenge here at this school and in, as they say, the academy generally, to encourage students to think again about how it's really back to this notion of humility, that your convictions can be strong. And frankly, I want people in public life whose convictions are strong. But I just don't believe that any one person or any one party has a lock on all the best ideas. And if you aren't open to that idea, that you may not have a corner on all the best ideas, that there is some room for persuasion or for just a different point of view, I think you're missing the opportunity to make real progress. So what I sometimes sense in the classroom and sometimes sense in the world is that if you say, look, I've got a really strong point of view, tell me what yours is, rather than I've got a really strong point of view, and if you don't agree with me, you are evil. That if you take that first approach, it's somehow lacking in conviction, it's lacking in a core or something like that. I think, bless you, I don't think moral or ethical leadership is necessarily righteousness. And I think it is possible to be right without being righteous. And that is a way to think about, again, if there's still room for persuasion in politics, it's a way to think about how you bring people along. I'll give you a concrete example of what I'm talking about. We have this course called Principles in Politics when Running for Office. It's not a how-to course. This is one of the courses you're referring to. It's not a how to run for office course. It's really for people who are thinking about it to examine why they want to run and for what. Again, to this point, lots of folks I encounter anyway have given a lot of thought to how to get this or that job, but not why they want that job, what they want to do with it. And we test this in a very personal way by sort of play acting various typical, milestones in a campaign. First exercise is writing a letter to someone you care about, someone you're not going to BS, about why you want to run. And then we ask the students to write that same letter at the end of the course, just to see if it's moved. Folks give a pitch to early supporters, or we do media, the hostile media interview. I know a lot about that. We had a kickoff speech given by one of the students to this cohort of 100 in front of the class. They had to do a 3-minute speech. This is not your cohort, this is last year. And the student got up, and he was from Colorado, and he talked about how, and we're all supposed to be listening for their why. He talked about how he had grown up outside of Denver, I think, and when he was a teenager, his 2 younger sisters were assaulted or molested in some way. And the perpetrator was prosecuted, but did not get a punishment that this student felt, his name was Chris, felt was appropriate. And he talked about how he went up to the State House and he was trying to interest legislators in closing what he described as this loophole. And he got the interest of a young senator who paid attention to him and then helped him develop a bill, advocated for that bill, and he talked about how he was there when Chris's law was signed into law. And you could have heard a pin drop in the classroom. It was beautiful. And then he said, I want to be that kind of senator, he said, because in my district, I can't remember the name of the district, we need that kind of senator to push back against the aggressive woke agenda. And there was a kind of a gasp that went out of the room. And then he finished, lots of applause, and there was student feedback. And I make a point at the start of the class, I'm new, at the start of the course, I'm new, I'm gonna make mistakes. I'm gonna get your pronoun wrong, I'm gonna mispronounce your name, I'm gonna say something that triggers you. Can we please, and somebody else will hear as well, just a little grace, just a little bit. Let's all just talk to each other instead of about each other. Let's try that. And so we're midway through the course, and the students have been marvelous that way, because they're, it gets hot. And folks are talking about how Chris had expressed his why, how it came through. I'm sorry this is going on so long, but they gave him great feedback. And then one student said, I feel like when you got to the end, you may have gone somewhere that is not consistent with the views of political views of a lot of the students in this class. And people started to shift and all that. And there were a couple of comments, and we were running out of time. And I said, Chris, let me come at it this way. I said, until you used the phrase aggressive woke agenda, you had every vote in this room, every single one. Now it is possible that everybody in the district knows what you mean. I said, but pretend I'm in the district and I don't. Because to me, you just got lazy at the end and decided to use a phrase that the people who already agree with you will hear as, he's one of us. I said, but if you're actually interested in winning the votes of people who don't already agree with you, break it down. Talk about what you mean by aggressive woke agenda. You might still get the votes of some of the folks in here. And I got really great feedback from him and other students about that. What I'm trying to say is, we have gotten so lazy in our civic discourse. We are signaling through slogans things that are much, much more rich in content than the labels presume. I have lots of other examples I could give, but as you see, it takes me a long time to give them, so I'll stop.
They're detailed responses.
Yeah.
Before I pivot to the last question, we'll open it up for audience questions. There's two mics, my right, my left. If you folks want to start lining up, please feel free to. And then after this last question, we'll open it up to the audience. So we talked about, in essence, what you're referring to as an experiment within itself, on what we can and cannot do to ensure folks are receptive to the overarching message that, in the case of Chris, may have been kosher, but the moment he threw something out there that folks can't relate to, is contentious, all of a sudden it dissolves. Staying on the theme of experiment and going down our own historical journey as Americans, the term experiment does not necessarily appear in any of our nation's founding documents. Yet, repeatedly, it's gained a prominent place in public political rhetoric. George Washington, in his first inaugural address, described the Republican model of government as an experiment entrusted to the hands of the American people. When asked if the federal Constitution of 1787 established a monarchy or a republic, Benjamin Franklin famously replied, "A republic if you can keep it." It is evident that preserving an experiment was always going to be a daunting task. How optimistic are you about the future of our democracy? And because in true Kennedy School fashion, I'll ask long-winded questions, which then I'll urge the audience not to do. I have a second part. How can we urge vigilance without exacerbating the divisions in an already divided America?
Ooh. So you read the second part of that question to me earlier, and I should have said then I'm not exactly sure I'm not exactly sure why vigilance or urging vigilance is itself provocative. I mean, that's what I hear in the question, maybe incorrectly. I think democracy is worth fighting for. It's worth, with the conditions I mentioned earlier, the functioning and the meaning. Because I think representative or participatory government does actually speak to a human need we have. We are communitarian, it seems to me, by instinct, maybe. We actually are more interested in turning to each other than on each other. But I think we need our leaders to encourage that, and I think we need politics as a way to work out those choices in the ways that I was talking about earlier for what it is we want government to do and not to do. And we need a forum for that. We need a framework for that. We need a language for that. And it has never been smooth and easy, and I'm not even sure they were as polite to each other at the Constitutional Convention as the paintings make them all seem. That's not what I'm talking about. It's more that the alternative of having government by impulse, by attitude, that's all about power, makes it perpetually hopeless for the powerless. So I think philosophically, I still believe that democracy is important. By the way, it was a radical idea at the time it was tried on here in the first instance, and it continues in many respects to be a radical idea because it needs to be refitted to the moment. I mean, one of the most remarkable things, if you think about it, about the United States is that we found ourselves from time to time. Lincoln redefined what a democracy was supposed to be by, in effect, as that marvelous short book on the Gettysburg Address discussed, sort of importing the Declaration of Independence into our constitutional framework, rhetorically and enduringly, I think. I think Dr. King did similar work, building on that. I'm an idealist, but I'm also very pragmatic. I mean, I know how to do things. I know how to see things as they are and call them what they are. I can be as hard-headed as the next person. I will say I really tire of people asking me, not you, but asking me how to remain optimistic. When I want to say, it would betray my ancestors not to remain optimistic. Now, optimism without action, that's not what I'm about. But optimism and doing what you can, including, encouraging you and others in this school and beyond to get involved and think about how to be involved and how to help them stay involved, I think is a part of doing what I can. But giving up on I am what my forebears imagined, and they imagined me against all odds, and the fact that only some of those odds have been overcome for too few of us does not mean that what they hoped for isn't a thing to honor by sustaining my own optimism.
Thank you for that. I would continue asking challenging questions, but I know grades are out, but I don't know if they're completely finalized. I still intend on graduating. Since you have a bias in class where you always go right, if you don't mind, I'm going to start left, and then we'll work right.
Okay.
Please, go ahead.
Good afternoon, Governor. My name is Trudy Schaefer. I'm a mid-career graduate from the class of 1994.
Excellent.
My question is slightly off topic. After graduation, I stayed in Massachusetts, so I had an opportunity to follow your gubernatorial service.
Uh-oh.
And, no, it's good, it's good. So I'm looking at the Harvard Gazette, May 10th, 2007. Massachusetts Governor Deval Patrick, Tuesday, May 8th, announced a $1 billion biotech initiative to secure Massachusetts in its position as a world leader in biotechnology and stem cell science. In September 2010, a company called Moderna Pharmaceuticals was founded. Your foresight in that initiative impacted the world, and I want to thank you for that. So my question is, if you had $1 billion today and you were up on the balcony, where would you invest?
In Massachusetts?
You choose.
So, thank you for the question, Trudy. First of all, it was $1 billion over 10 years. So, $1 billion is a lot of money to me, even broke it out into 10 years. In the scheme of things, it wasn't. It was the right size for us, for Massachusetts. And what we were trying to do, because I'm a capitalist. I'm not sort of capitalist who thinks private markets can solve every problem. But what I was trying to do was to figure out, as part of a strategy of climbing out of recession, to figure out where were our strengths and where could, working with different sectors, we in government could close gaps and be an enabling force. It's a funny story about Moderna, because a small part of that money was flexible money for companies in the so-called Valley of Death. Do you know what those are?
Yeah.
So these are companies where the concept has been proven, but they're not ready to be commercial, and it's really hard for them to get funding, or was. And we had a Nobel, these weren't government grants, they were small grants, but and funded by the government, but the deciders were scientists and business people and so forth. We had a Nobel laureate who ran this little group, and they awarded a grant to this company called Moderna that was in the Valley of Death and would have vanished but for that grant. Look at them now. Mm-hmm. The business side of me said, why don't we have a stake in these companies as a Commonwealth? Right. Today, I think life science, you don't even recognize Kensal Square now. Life sciences, we are the global destination for that industry, and God bless my successor and his successor. They see the merits of that continued support. Most of it is not money, by the way. A lot of it is cheerleading. What we did not finish, and so it's a long way around to your point, is spreading that kind of related industry beyond Route 128. So, for example, it doesn't make any sense to do manufacturing in Cambridge. It's just too expensive. But you could do it in Central Mass or Western Mass or down the South Coast, competitively with North Carolina or Texas, for example, especially now that folks are beginning to appreciate what I've worried about for a long time, which is having more domestic supply chains than we have had. Now, the way to make that work has a lot to do with things that aren't sort of industry specific, like transportation, like affordable housing. Right? So I'd be looking at that sort of thing. I'll say one last thing, and I say this as an American, not just as a Democrat. The Biden administration has produced opportunities from chips and infrastructure and the rescue plan, the rest of it, that had this conversation with Jennifer Granholm, who was in office when I was during the Great Recession. She was in office in Michigan. If we'd had those tools to be able to cobble together into an opportunity strategy, tailored to region, whew, fantastic. I hear nobody talking and planning that way with all of these tools, including from the Biden administration right now. But these are generational resources that can catalyze so much in the not-for-profit and the for-profit private sectors for sustained opportunity growth and to bring people who've been marginalized in the economy into the mainstream economy. Phew, all day long. I mean, this is huge. Have I avoided your question properly?
You did good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor, for being here today. Paul Steinberg, part of the MPA2 class from 1994.
All right.
I have a question regarding the tension between democratic participation by ordinary people and professional expertise. So this group presumably cares a lot about both of those things. Robert Dahl, one of our great political theorists, wrote this book, Democracy and His Critics, and he said the greatest critique, the most effective critique of democracy is from the experts, saying ordinary people don't know better, leave it to us, leave it to the experts. And so I wonder, either in your own experiences or in your broader reflections on politics, what your experience has been with that. Yeah. My personal experience with this very recently has been with bicycle and pedestrian advocacy in Southern California. There is no more effective opponent than the engineering profession that is just hardwired, not all of the engineers, but is hardwired to just move automobiles fast down the street as opposed to what you see here in Cambridge. And so I sort of I've also experienced this not just theoretically as a political scientist, but personally as an activist. And I wonder what your experience has been with that, with the sort of trade-off between democratic participation and professional expertise.
Yeah, it's a great question, Paul. I think that there is a place for expertise. I mean, I don't know anything. I'm a frustrated architect, so I would probably get more involved in some of those kinds of decisions than a governor ought to be, frankly. But I will also say, I'm not that interested in abstract policy. I'm interested in policy where it touches people, where it actually touches people. And so what I encouraged my team to do, we wanted smart people because, I feel better with smarter people around me. I want to be challenged. I want to understand. But I wanted to be sure that my team could answer my questions, and more to the point, regular folks' questions, ordinary folks' questions, about what happens when that policy gets to them, when that choice gets. How do they experience it? What's it like? Is it easy? If you land at Logan, you take the bus to the water taxi and the water taxi across and walk over to South Station and take a commuter rail out to some neighborhood and pick up your car at the parking lot and drive home. You don't care about which agency is responsible for which part of that trip. You just want it to be safe and smooth and reliable and as modern as possible. So how do you think about organizing government and delivering policy from that perspective? Frankly, that's why we got to 98+% of healthcare coverage when nobody else had been doing anything like it before, because we spent a lot of time with patients and nurses and families trying to understand what affordability ought to mean, what minimum something care ought to include, because all that stuff was brand new. So when the website failed, it's like, okay, the website failed. That's not what healthcare reform was about. It wasn't about a website. I think that the worry I have and around the participation has to do with what happens in politics, not so much policy. Because there is a consultant class, many of them are fabulous, who have an enormous impact on politicking. You know, how many of you can't wait for the next political ad? Raise your hand. Yeah, very few hands go up. But that's where the money is raised. That's where the consultants make their money in many cases. I'm just taking one example. And the notion of raising all this money so you build a relationship with voters through 30-second ads in the last few weeks of the campaign, that's not a relationship. A relationship is conversation. It's out there. It's listening, right? And and I think we did that part of the politicking well. I think we're still trying to work out how to do that part of the governing that way. And I think that's a continuing challenge.
Hello. My name is Rashi. I'm from Canada, and I'm from the MCMPA class of 2019, which is the best represented class here numbers-wise.
Did you say Rashi with an R?
Rashi.
Rashi.
So my question is about style versus cynicism. It's no secret that we live in a deeply divided world, and this reunion has reminded me that we're not just ideas and ideals, but real people behind them. My question is how we can build kinship in an age of remote work and social media, where style is often embraced over substance, and how we can use that to ensure effective democracy where all people are seen and considered.
Wow. Rashi, thank you for the question. There's some risk in my of sounding like a Luddite when I think about the tools that we use today and that absorb us today, and that you read your question from, as being. I wonder whether we have gained most or lost most. We've done a research project called Shared America, which is turning into a freestanding not-for-profit, trying to examine whether there are ties still that bind us in this country and what they are. And I'm persuaded now, and the reason why we've taken it to the next step in an independent C3, is that we are a lot less divided than we think we are. We are, and by the way, it's not news, we are being actively divided, right? I mean, and part of the agenda, domestic and foreign, of the dividers is to discourage us from knowing each other. One of the things that struck me when I got the first brief, I still had my security clearance in 2016. I got an early briefing of what we all know now about Russian foreign involvement in the 2016 election, and it's it's just gotten, that kind of thing has gotten more sophisticated since. But it struck me then, as it does now, how easy it was to divide us, and it's easy to divide us because we don't know each other. We don't know each other. You know, we are so busy. You don't fit in a box. I don't fit in a box, but we are so. We all know we don't fit in a box individually, but we're so busy putting other people in a box. That person is black, and therefore that must mean blah, 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 blah. That person's a Republican, and therefore that must mean blah, 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 blah. You fill in all the rest of it. That person went to Harvard. You fill in all the rest of it. Come on, you know it's true. We are so, it's lazy. It's lazy. But I found one of the most fascinating things about living is waiting the beat or two for people to reveal the surprise about them. You know, it's rich. It's incredible. And you find out all kinds, but it's really, really hard to do in public life. Incredibly valuable, but really hard to do. It's one of the reasons why I feel so strongly about national service. I wish I don't think we'd ever be able to do it in a mandatory way, as is done in other parts of Israel, for example. And I don't care whether it's military or domestic. I wish there was an expectation that we would spend a year working alongside, not busy work, but working alongside others from elsewhere in this country, meeting unmet needs. Because I think rather than just being in a circle saying we don't know each other, let's get to know each other, but actually having to break a sweat with other people is a great way to get to know them over time. Break bread with other people, great way to get to know them over time, and you start to hesitate around your own cartoon way of seeing other people, and because I don't want to be put in a box, I'm trying to show that same respect to, the same deference to others. Thank you. Thank you.
Class of MPP, class of '84, Joni Korhonen. I have a question on leadership. Who will fix the tea?
Ooh. Did you say Yom?
Joni.
Yomi.
Yes.
Oh, there's a great story in that we tried twice. The public's with us, by the way, and was with us well before it got to the crisis it is now. I'm going to tell you something that will seem like a cop-out. It's not. We are not going to have a 21st century transportation system in Boston without new revenue. There is no amount of reorganization that will do it. No amount of reorganization. The person I think was, in some respects, the best suited to do it was the governor once removed, right after me, because the funding system that caused the T to stop investing in its regular maintenance was designed by him when he was head of administration and finance. So who will fix the T? It's not going to be up to the governor alone. It's ultimately going to be up to the legislature. I think the public is there. I think they understand it. I'll say one last thing about the public. It was a part of our general transportation plan, not limited to the T, because how long have you been around here? You've been around here a long time?
Well, I was here 40 years ago, as a student, and the tea is exactly as it was then.
No, it's not. No, the tea is worse now than it was then. No, the tea is worse off than it was then. But we spent, I don't know how many years and a lot of money on the big dig, and that diverted, those overages diverted resources from the rest of the Commonwealth. And so, to me, at the time when I was proposing new revenue for the T, I was unwilling to propose that without revenue that would meet the unmet needs elsewhere in the Commonwealth that had been starved for as long as they had. As I said, if the polling is to be believed, the public was there, but we couldn't get the legislature there. And I hope the current governor will ask.
Good afternoon, Governor.
Hi.
Thank you for your time. My name is JB. I'm come from the great state of California. I'm an attorney, and my wife's a current fellow here in the Kennedy School. My question is this. Actually, I'll start with a comment. I'm reading a book right now, and it's done by a former Navy SEAL, and he was asked one time, who are the candidates who are going to make it past Hell Week, make it past Buzz, make it through the program. He said, I can't answer that, but I can tell you who's not going to make it, right? The characteristics of who can't make it, who will fail, essentially. Some of the comments you talked about today raised a question in my mind, right? You talk about your class in terms of detailing, getting people involved in the process, right? Humility, right? But I want you to go deeper into that in regards to, as the electorate, right? The people who are going to vote for people who are going to go into office. What do you think makes up some of the greater qualities, right, of a candidate, of a successful, not just politician, as you talked about the combination of the politics and the government, right? But who really has that type of essence, shall we say, that we should be looking for from the outside? Not just the marketing, not just the advertising, but the substance.
Well, this is my answer is very personal. I really do want, and I'm attracted to, and I try to support candidates with real conviction, who have a sense of purpose about being in office, and whom I would describe as servant leaders. Because I do think that's what it's supposed to be about. And the folks, and again, I know this is old-fashioned, but may run hard as a Democrat or a Republican, as a Democrat, but who understand when they win, they're responsible for everybody, not just the folks who voted for them, and not just the folks in their party. I don't think that I'm interested in, and I don't want to be heard as someone who doesn't believe people should have strong convictions about what it is they want to do, or what it is they believe in. More to the point. I'm just saying, look, I have really strong views about a bunch of things. Somebody else might have a different way to think about that, and I want to be listening for that, because if I am, I might take that better way and make an outcome that lasts and isn't just, my thing, but is ours. I want people who, I want people who are prepared to leave these jobs while they remember how to open their own door. This is not a small thing. It was great being driven for 8 years, and I hate parallel parking, so I like to drive, but reverse is hard, I find. It was great to be not having to look for a place to park and all that, but guess what? Everybody else has to look for a place to park. Everybody else has to figure where did your Yomi go? Has to worry about the T, or how to get from here to there, or why it is their rent keeps going up as fast as it has, or why the only things that are getting built are luxury condos and not apartments that regular working people can live in. I think you have to stay close to the experience of people. Not to say that government should try to solve every problem in everybody's life. That's not what people want. But it should help people help themselves. And that's what I believe. And I think unless you are connected in some way, unless you keep being reminded of whom you serve, then you will miss things. And I miss things. We had run this incredible, improbable campaign at the grassroots for a year and a half, and I won, and I walked into the chamber, the governor's office, and it was a dump, and it was falling apart. So we fixed it up a little bit, and I was told by the state police, you got to get a new car because the one that Governor Romney was driving was dead and or dying. And I said, well, just get another one of those. They said, I don't make it anymore. And I said, well, go get what other governors drive. And they went and got what other governors drive, which is a Cadillac sedan. But don't be a black man driving a Cadillac. You laugh, but I got hammered over stuff like that, hammered over it. And in fairness, there were members of my team who said, don't be a black guy driving a Cadillac. Now, when the Herald reported once it was fitted out with the lights and the siren and all that, it was Patrick's tricked out ride. I knew the message being sent, but still, we were about to go into a recession, and here I was in a break, right? So I, as my grandmother said, started to smell myself, right? You have to stay connected. And I think that's the sort of thing, the kind of instinct I'm looking for in our candidates. And by the way, I think it's an instinct that it might surprise people. Even now, has purchase in eligible voters.
Very quick follow-up. Obviously, great answer. In regards to any litmus tests you use personally?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay. That's simple. Thank you.
Hello, it's good to see you, Governor. Ekaterina Sharashidze-Voskamp from MPP 99.
Katerina.
I've lived in London for the last 15 years, and the world, the US, looks somewhat different from there. It's been great to come here and immerse myself back in US politics. But from the view from Europe and the rest of the world, it's unfathomable for people that this vast country with smart, intelligent people would have two candidates, two old men with questionable abilities, for me personally still one incomparable to the other, and that we could not produce any better candidates. And we see increasingly that smart, capable, experienced people with good moral compass, you being the best example, stay away from politics, from being congressmen, senators, running for the presidency. How did we end up here? Why are these people not going into politics? How did we end up then the best and the brightest of the United States don't want to be there, and people who are there for screaming, for sound bites, for different reason, for what they were supposed to be there for? And how do we fix that?
So, Katerina, I didn't stay away from it. I ran for president for 15 minutes. I mean, now I just say I'm not old enough to be president. We have I mean, it's a brutal experience today to run for office, almost any office. I mean, even school committee in a lot of places. And that has a lot to do with some of the things we've been talking about earlier, and it's going to respond to some of the fixes that I mentioned earlier and others. But I do want to be real clear. We have a lot of really fabulous people in government. A lot of fabulous people in government and in politics who are serving in office today, who are trying to serve in office today. Many of them have served for a long time. They're terrific candidates right now. I would say as a Democrat, we had, I was really proud of the talent of the field the last time out in whatever that was, 2020. And then it comes together. There isn't really logic, I would say, to the outcomes of a presidential election, maybe any election. Some of it is the moment, and how the stars align or don't, as the case may be. Lots and lots of people were surprised, I was not, by the outcome of the 2016 election when Donald Trump won. I wasn't surprised, though. I mean, he say what you will, he speaks to a lot of the anger that a lot of folks feel who are feeling left out and left behind, unseen and unheard. I am actually really hopeful about the generation coming along. I think there are a lot of folks who want to be in public life and who are running for office, a lot of younger folks and promising folks, and a lot of newer office holders who are working really hard to keep their own idealism and their own ambition for us, not for them, but for us, alive and broad. And I think that's good because as a country, I think we have to remind ourselves that we are capable of thinking about and doing big things. That we're not, it doesn't all have to be small ball all the time. That we can imagine the kind of future we want and reach for it. And it's really, really important to have leaders, I think, who encourage us to do that. And I think there are a bunch of them in service right now or running. So stay tuned.
So just very quickly, we'll batch the final 3 questions, if you don't mind, Governor. Sure. So we'll start there, and then if you both want to go ahead, then we can answer them all at once.
Okay.
Awesome. Hello. My name is Mariama Kabia, MPP, class of 2014. I would love to hear your thoughts on cross-sector leadership. I work on social impact at a tech company, and so many of my colleagues work across sectors, civil society, but they're working on topics such as education, digital inequity, et cetera. So curious what, in your experience, makes a good partner across sectors to those in public service?
Great. Thank you. Mariama, excuse me.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I see what you're doing. And you are doing a fabulous job.
Well, thank you.
Here, here.
So Governor Patrick, Jackie Yerby from the great state of Oregon, not Oregon. So if you ever visit my state, it's Oregon. And for the last 4 years of Governor Kate Brown's term, I was her behavioral health policy advisor. And so, you know, thinking about big ideas and optimism and cynicism, I see like the Oregon State Legislature making promises, like writing checks that they can't actually cash. And I worry about, like, and we just did this with recriminalizing public use of drugs. And so they've said, we're gonna do all these things, but there's no foundation. And I worry about fostering cynicism when Oregonians don't actually see the results of these promises. And so I'm curious about, like, yeah, I don't know, like what recommendations you have for how we navigate that disconnect.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Jackie, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. My name is Lila Kuznetsov. I'm an MPAID 04.
Did you say Lila?
Lila. Mm-hmm. I am an American citizen, but I've been living abroad for the past 20 years mostly. And my question is in a way a follow-up to the one just before us, which is that there has been a lot of commentary on the fact that we have 2 very old people running for president, and who are the alternatives? And my question is very tactical. What could President Biden be doing to raise more awareness of the next generation of potential candidates? It's a 3-part question. If he's not doing it, is that structural or is it a choice? And then finally, I was heartened to hear that you said that there is a lot of great talent. There are a lot of great candidates coming up. So who could we keep an eye on for the next 4 to 8 years that you find exciting?
Wow. Okay. All right, I'm gonna spend time on Mariana and Jackie's questions so I run out of time for Lila's. So on cross-sector leadership, I'm very clear that most of the challenges that face humankind, you know, the climate crisis or, you know, chronic poverty, they're not going to be solved by one sector working on its own. It's going to require collaboration across sectors. So I'm interested in and try to encourage in the students I meet, candidates I meet, to expose yourself to the other sectors, learn that language, you know, learn how decisions are made. One of the things I got interested in when I was in office was something called social impact bonds, because it was private money where you could experiment and on solving a public policy challenge And then with those proof points, you'd have an enhanced case to the legislature to try to do something different. Because usually what happens with new policy is that it comes in on top of the old one instead of the old one. So you get layers and layers and layers of forms and programs and what have you. Look at the tax code. That's just one example. So I think because we are getting to a point of, and this gets around to Jackie's point, I think, of some overweight to almost collapse in some of our social programs, or our public programs, there will be an opportunity to rethink this in collaboration. So that's what, I'm going to stop there. Jackie, on the over-promising of the legislature, of the, where'd you go? Of the over-promising of the, I can see you now. I wanted to be able to speak to you. That it's always a risk, whether the proponent of the policy or the legislators enacting it will overpromise. I really feel strongly, again, to the point about staying close to where policy touches people, that if you are engaging, if the policy is responsive to the people you're trying to serve, it will work. And if it doesn't work overnight, folks will understand what you're trying to do to get from here to there. It's hard to do. And by the way, when I say close to the folks being served, I'm not just saying close to the folks who lead the interest group advocating for the folks being served. That is a part of the conversation too. But actually the folks being served, when we were trying to figure out healthcare reform, it was patients, not just patient advocates, that we were trying to engage. So I do think this is important, and you always run the risk of disappointing people. You always do. We got plenty of stuff wrong. I pause for the folks from Massachusetts to agree. We got plenty of stuff wrong, but I think in most cases we were trying to explain to people what we were trying to do. Really super quick example, which went unnoticed. I was in office when the bombs went off at the Boston Marathon. At the end of that week, I authorized a stay-at-home. It was a request, really, but it's often described as my lockdown of the city, and we did it while the neighborhood into which the surviving suspect had escaped, while they were doing a house-to-house search, and they finished around 5 o'clock. I think it was around there, and they hadn't found it, and so it was time to tell everybody. I told you this would end. When we finished the search, we hadn't finished the search, we hadn't found it. And I was out telling that when one of the people came out of their houses and said, I think there's somebody in the boat out in the backyard. I was out saying that when the guy was apprehended. And so we stopped and we finished that, and then we came out and told everybody what they already knew. Now, suppose they hadn't. And I just asked everybody to stay indoors for the whole day. And then I'd have to come out and say, sorry. And I remember the very first question I was asked was, are you giving the all clear? Not really, because he was still at large. You just take that, that's a chance you have, but you have to explain yourself, I think. Lila, on the question about the next generation, I mean, there are some folks. Wes Moore is a mentee of mine, new governor in Maryland. He's fantastic. I think he's trying really hard, trying to do some great things. I think a lot of the governor of Michigan as well. I think she's really talented. And by the way, her Secretary of State, Jen Benson, also amazing. And I think will run for governor soon. Those are a couple of examples I think
Very specifically, why Why isn't President Biden giving more of a platform to raise?
I
these
don't
people
know
up and
the
make them
answer.
more visible?
I don't know the answer to the question. I don't know that the premise is accurate. Right. I'm just not close enough. I would suspect we'll see more of this in term 2, when it feels like, there's less threat. I don't know. I do think President Biden will win re-election. I think it'll be closer than it ought to be. I think it'll be closer than it ought to be. And I will say this too, just to provoke you all. We need a functioning Republican Party. We need a functioning Republican Party. Or whatever the other party. We need a competitive alternative for the system to work. I'm going to say last thing, because I think we're over time, right?
We've got a few minutes.
Do you have a wrap up or?
Just a short one. But
Okay, you go.
Please.
No, you're in charge.
Well, I was rethinking my comment about grades, and I realized I don't think they're going to change, so I can ask you one last question. And I think this is along the lines of what Laila and Katerina asked. Despite your genuine disdain for political consultants and ads, will we ever see you in an ad again?
You mean like as an example of what not to do, or
as an example
an ad
of
for
a beneficiary
an
of the
anti-aging?
consultants?
You mean am I going to run for something? Is that what we're going to? Well, I'm not. Like I said, I'm not old enough to run for president.
So there's hope.
People say never, and so I won't say never.
Okay.
But I don't want to be the guy who's in the way of the talent coming. To the question that Lila was asking. And by the way, most of the talent I'm talking about could care less whether I was in the way or not. They just run right over me. They're that good. But no, I think there are lots of ways to serve, Omar. You and I have talked about this. You don't have to be in office to serve. You can, yeah, right. You don't have to be in office. And by the way, you don't even have to be in government to serve. It's an attitude. It's a way of being. It's a way of encouraging. It's an example you set. And the reason I think that matters goes back to the sense of being that policy actually does matter where it touches people. And I might just leave with this, unless you have another one.
Please.
I don't know what time we're supposed to finish.
Oh, we're good. We've got another 10. So.
Okay. When we did an early round of sentencing reform. This was a new idea then. And by the way, the folks who were doing mandatory minimums and all that stuff, the folks who were most aggressive about doing away with mandatory minimums when I was in office were Republican governors, because they said, this is breaking the budget. And the folks who were reluctant to do it were Democrats who were afraid of being accused of being soft on crime. And so I'm trying to press, and we had this great big initiative, and we were out trying to engage folks in community about what ought to be in the bill. And something that I hadn't focused on, but that came up repeatedly from folks, mind you, 90% of the folks who go in or more get out one day. And getting back into mainstream life, we make incredibly difficult. I don't mean just in Massachusetts, but around the country. And so folks are saying, look, we need a job. And we can do things, but we can't even get an interview because you have to check the box. And this was the beginning of I think we were the first or the second state to have a ban the box proposal. And it was so-called CORI reform, the criminal offender record something or other system. And when the bill was finally passed, after almost a year of wrangling with the legislature, we went out to sign it in a place called Freedom Hall in Roxbury, which existed, somebody knows what I'm talking about, which is a wonderful old building in Roxbury. In the basement, unair conditioned, it was jammed on the hottest day in recorded time. And we got there, and I think the capacity was maybe 200 people, and the fire marshal was about to shut it down because there were 300 people in there. It's like you could see the air hovering. And we said, hang on, it's not going to take very long. I just need to sign this bill. And I'm going in, the state police are trying to make a little channel for me to get to the table and make my remarks. And there was just euphoria in the room. And I signed the bill. Now I'm on my way out, and this guy hands me a cell phone. And he said, Governor, talk to my friend. And I'm wiggling out. And I said, okay, I take the call. And the guy says, Governor, thanks for signing this bill. I know it's going to make a difference in my life. And I said, well, make the most of it. And I gave the phone back. 4 years later, I'm in Western Massachusetts. And we stop early for an event. We stop to get lunch at a restaurant downtown. And we're standing in the takeout line, and this guy comes up in chef's togs. And he gives me a sort of double look and, what's it called? Double take, which I always attribute to the fact that I'm taller on TV. Yeah. You don't have to say yeah that enthusiastic. And he says, are you the governor? And I said, yes. And he said, you signed that Corey bill? And I said, yes. And he said, do you remember talking to a guy on the phone that day? I said, as a matter of fact, I do. He said, well, that was me. I said, beg your pardon? He said, I was sitting in jail when you took that call, and that's him now. And he said, I got out of jail. He said, I got a job in a restaurant because of that bill. He said, I'm the executive chef in this restaurant today. To me, that's a... And I've got these big state troopers around me. They're bawling. I'm crying. To me, that's where policy matters. And that wasn't even what we were thinking about when we started on the journey of sentencing reform. So it's not all the stuff that gets attention. But to this point I was making about trying to be a servant leader, trying to pay attention to what people need from their government and what government can and can't do, where it can act alone and where it has to work in collaboration and so forth. I think that's the kind of leadership we need in politics, and I think there are a lot of reasons to be hopeful that that kind of leadership is on offer.
Thank you for that. Thank you again, Governor Patrick. So, I think in closing, I just want to add the trend of Democratic backsliding is obviously not only alarming here in the United States, but also for the global community. Optimistically and idealistically, I think we've all been the United States has long been a symbol for democratic resilience. Again, the political pundits can slice and dice this, but there's that optimistic wing that believes that we have influenced countless nations in their own democratic journeys. I can tell you personally, as a first-generation immigrant, I've seen what societies can revert to in the absence of democratic governance and civic participation. And as a veteran of the armed forces, I've been privileged to represent U.S. interests across the globe as a military diplomat. And I've also seen the broader implications of what's happening today, where the regression in the democratic index has a direct correlation with folks that have to represent interests abroad and how it dilutes our authority at times to be able to do so. I think that said, addressing the internal challenges we discussed today at home and abroad is essential to the health of our respective democracies, not just for representatives that are from the states, but from the global community. I'm grateful for the alumni that joined us here today over the past few days. Soon-to-be alumni like me stand on the shoulders of giants of all of you. Your tireless efforts in the wide array of ecosystems, I've heard folks in the private sector, nonprofit world, and all over, certainly serve as a North Star from time to time for folks like us who are looking to do what's next. So for that, we remain in debt for your committed excellence and, more importantly, your commitment to the Kennedy School. So thank you.
Thank you, Omer.
Thank you.